There we are. All right. I think we are live.
Okay, so I'm just checking on my phone, Gemma, and just if anybody can see us and you're joining, I'm just making sure that we're actually live in the group.
Hello,
And
everybody.
yes,
Perfect.
I can see us. I can see us
Oh,
live.
brilliant. Oh, there we are. Brilliant. Good stuff. So hopefully people can start to find their way to us and start to join us. I can see there's a couple of people. Hello. Do let us know in the comments that you can see us and hear us. That's always good to know. And let us know that you are there. It's always a bit weird right at the start.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about the yapping, guys. I'm really sorry. I've told them to try and keep the dogs quiet. And so long as the teenagers don't start barking, hey?
It's quite a stressful time for you, I gather, at the moment.
It is. Josie's doing her A levels. Oh, shut up, dogs. Jude, thank goodness Jude isn't doing his GCSEs at the same time because Agnes, our friend, the other group, which 11 plus sats, blah 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 blah. Sorry, Agnes. She's got two daughters, one doing A levels, one doing GCSEs. So I know that's
stressful.
Yeah. So we've now got quite a few eyes on us, Gemma, which is great. So whenever you're ready,
brilliant.
I can introduce you. I think we've got it's nice. We've got about 21 people that I can see, which is lovely.
Hello, everyone.
Just excuse me 1 minute, guys.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm just going to go and shut my dogs up.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Do let us know that you are here. And if you are watching this on replay, please do hashtag replay so that we know you're there. It's always good to see people on the comments and for people to ask questions on the comments. And please do feel free to ask questions because ultimately that's what this live is for. So so should we kick off?
So sorry guys, I had to run and shut my three horrible yappy dogs up. So I would like to welcome my friend Jemma of the Education Hotel to the Cadwallader Quests reading, creative writing kind of vocabulary group. And we're going to talk about how you can make the most of your year 4 summer, because year 4 is still quite not a laid back, but it's a nice year. And anyway, you'll find out our tips, my tricks, and Gemma's experience as an incredible tutor. So take it away, please, Jemma. And I'll look down here and I'll answer whatever I can.
Perfect, brilliant. So please do ask questions in the comments because you get Sheena's lovely knowledge, which is really useful. So obviously Sheena's introduced me and I'm sure you know who she is. But in case you don't, this is her group. And Sheena is a best-selling author. She's written, what are we on, 5?
More
than this now.
There's 5 novels released now with 2 to come, but there's quite a lot of workbooks there that you can see behind me that I've co-written. But we can, so quite a few books, but anyway.
And some special ones for year 4, which ultimately is one of the things that we'll be talking about tonight. And part of the reason that I thought I'd reach out to Sheena and say, can we offer something to help year 4 parents who are going into summer? And luckily she agreed to join me on this live, which is great. So ultimately, I was thinking when I was writing this, kind of what questions do people often get hold of me and say, I'm in year 4 and typically this is the time when I take a lot of calls. So I speak to a lot of parents at this point, and often they're saying to me, you know, we're kind of coming along on this 11 plus progress, 11 plus journey, and we're a bit stuck. And so I've written down a couple of key points that I think would be useful for everyone to be aware of. But I know that people start this process at different points. So I suppose the first thing that I would be saying is where you are at year 4 is where you should be at year 4, because there are some people who really haven't started in terms of 11 plus. There are some people who've been working on it for a while. And I mean, Sheena, if you think back to all those years ago, do you know when you started preparation?
So, as I say, my daughter Josie's now doing A levels. Now, way back then, things were very different. I don't think I was even on Facebook, and I could only go. So we found our tutor via a verbal recommendation. With her, I didn't even really think about it seriously until year 5. However, with Jude, who's doing GCSEs now, I definitely started in year 4 and was more leisurely. And I would really recommend starting in year 4. But I also have another adage, another sort of saying, and I see parents asking when they should start. And I see parents talking about year 2 and 3, and then they get cruel comments on their feed. Here's what I think. It is never too early to start teaching your child at home for anything. It's all about how you do it.
Yeah,
so you have to make it, when they're little, you have to dress it up as fun. You can start vocab from the cradle, but you don't hammer it into them via word lists. You can start the times tables from reception, but play music in the car and sing to it. We used to do the times table rap, and they loved it. They were like rappers in the car, but singing about the 2 times table. So it's never too early to start, but you have to be very careful about how you do it. And in year 4, that's when you can start talking about the 11 plus.
Yeah, I think
that's just that's my experience.
Yeah, and I think I'd back that up in terms of, I often say foundations are for before year 4, because foundations are, that idea of times tables, the idea of numeracy, the idea of kind of fun learning and reading with your children and going on walks and making up stories, and all of that is learning. It's also about introducing your child to learning outside of school, because some students don't have homework at school, and if you suddenly go into 11 plus prep, that's a really big change for a student who's been doing nothing after school, nothing at the weekends, and then suddenly they're sitting there with a workbook doing 11 plus. And I know Bond does now, it does everything from kind of reception upwards, but my recommendations for pre-year 4 is always the emphasis should be on fun and should be on foundations. So more about kind of like doing it and making it interesting and making it a family thing and bringing in games and bringing in kind of that interactive learning. And then year 4 might be the time to consider those workbooks and start putting a little bit more emphasis on that process having an outcome. Before that, it's more learning for the sake of getting used to learning and enjoying it. And now we've got a goal in mind, and it is still about enjoying it, but it's goal orientated from that point.
Absolutely. And I think it's also worth saying, parents out there, not all 11 plus exams are made equally. And what I mean by that is, there are certain areas of the country where there are more schools, and it might be easier for your child to get a place at that school. And there are other schools where there's like the schools my kids go to, they're CEM papers. They're no different to anybody else's CEM papers. But because the schools are so oversubscribed, they have to get a really high mark. And again, when it comes to that, I would say your vocabulary at home and your grasp of English is going to really be what helps you there. And vocabulary needs to start very young, because from my own experience, and I've got English as a first language, and I know lots of you might not, it took the longest with my kids. So I think, it might even take longer with yours if you've not got English as a first language at home. What are your thoughts on that, Jemma?
It takes time. I mean, it takes time to learn any foundation skill as well. So in terms of vocab, it is something you're building on. And I always say to my students, when you're getting to 11 plus, it's a pyramid. So you've got to start with those broad foundations, that really strong broad foundation. There's no point moving into doing a paper when actually your child is really struggling with multiplication. You've got to build those foundation skills and then you build up on top of them. So that for English, it sits on a knowledge of vocabulary, it sits on a knowledge of spellings and grammar and those kind of base areas. And that is something that goes the whole way through that 11 plus process. It isn't something that you do at the start and leave. It isn't something you just do at the end. It should be the whole way through. So really strong foundations is kind of the thing pre-year four.
I think, again, obviously, I hate maths. I'm awful. I hate NVR. I'm awful. But I do know about the vocab side. And for the CEM, certainly in our area, the verbal skills, because there is no verbal reasoning in any CEM paper. Let's get this right. There isn't any. The third-party providers have got that wrong. But it's a misnomer. They call it verbal reasoning, but it's not. There's only verbal reasoning in GL. So the actual verbal skills part of most CEM papers makes up 50% of the marks. And that's why it's key and critical to have this strong foundation in English and verbal skills, as well as maths and non-verbal reasoning. But it's just if 50% of your paper's made up of verbal skills, then obviously
got to start with it. Yeah. And I think that's why I'd also say it's somewhat unusual, but one of the things I say to my year 4 parents is take a look at a paper. Take a look at a paper because it shows you where you should be aiming. And we live in at a point where it's very easy to ask a question on social media, on Telegram, and everywhere, and to get back a whole load of advice. And a lot of that advice can be really useful, but you need to know where you're aiming as opposed to where everybody else is aiming, where everyone else is giving advice for, because it can be quite hard. You need to know where you're aiming as opposed. There we are. That's
sorry, right. My bad. Sorry.
But yeah, it's about knowing your targets. So know the schools that you're aiming for. Know the exam boards that the school is going for, because yes, for those foundation skills, it's all the same and the syllabus is fairly similar, but it starts to narrow, just like the skills narrow, the style of the question changes. So you really want to know, have seen an exam paper, be clued up on your exam boards, know the target schools that you're aiming for. It's the first question I ask any potential parent who comes to me is what your target schools, because I need to know, okay, what exams are we thinking of, and are we looking at multiple exam boards, are we looking at different independent and grammar, and I know I seem to remember, Sheena, that you've got a story regarding being on the school's mailing list. Is that right?
On the school's mailing list?
Yes.
So I've always been on the school's mailing list, just in case anything changed. And the reason why I did this, actually, that's not true. I got caught out with Josie's school. So with Jude's school, yes. But with Josie's school, we found out. So I started in year 5. This is Kendrick, year 5. And I was very green. And don't forget, there's no Facebook groups then. Nothing. If you even put 11 plus into Google, there wasn't even that much stuff. And in April, so we started in the September of year 5. In April, so we had May, June, July, August. A friend of mine said, have you heard that Kendrick have changed the exam board from GL to CEM? And I went, no. So that is how our initiation into vocabulary was like, boom. And that's when I went on the school's mailing list after that, for Reading School. And indeed, Reading School changed their exam last year like that. And you know what? They did not publish a familiarization paper until June.
So it's really worth being on those mailing lists. Yeah. And again, I would say I know lots of people ask these questions on groups such as this. They ask about specific schools, and in terms of knowledge about things like exam dates or registration dates, I'd always go straight to the school, because and I'm a tutor, as well-meaning as tutors are, we get it wrong sometimes, and we wouldn't want to be responsible for that mistake when the school is the person who's putting out that information. So that's why I'd always say, at this point, get yourself on the mailing lists. So
yeah, and to be honest, parents, anything, there's some fabulous groups, there's some fabulous information, but there's also some other more spurious stuff, which I would take no notice of. But when it comes to dates and exam boards, do your own research. Don't listen to somebody else. And especially when it comes to catchment, the amount of time I see really upset parents whose children have done amazingly well in many 11 plus tests, and they don't realize that they're never going to get a place because of catchment. In where we live, you could get 100% in the 11 plus, but if you're not in catchment, you're not getting a place. But you can still sit the exam, but you're not going to get in.
And lots of people do sit the exam as a practice.
Yeah, they do.
They'll do it because they're taking it elsewhere.
Yes, that's another debate, but another conversation. But what I'm saying is, I see so many disappointment, and I wonder sometimes whether these kids that have sat know, because can you imagine sitting a test getting 100% and then being told you can't go?
Yeah.
So do your research. Anyway, yeah.
All right. Okay, so other things about year 4, I've got down. Oh yeah, so in terms of kind of key math and English topics, there is no one syllabus. Lots of different people have checklists. I'll pop down a link for checklists at some point. And then the kind of key thing at the bottom, read as wide as you can. And I think that's something that's fairly key around the whole of this presentation is the importance of starting some of those key skills early. And then I suppose avoiding burnout, it's a really common topic, and I see parents often come up to me say, my child's in year 3 and I'm wanting them to do papers, or my child's in year 4 and they are only scoring this, and I'm thinking, okay, you really got to watch it, because you've got a whole nother year. And it can be hard. It can be really hard when you're on social media and you're on your phone and you've got these, you've got year 5 parents, and you've got some very enthusiastic year 5 parents as well, who are posting a lot and posting what their child's doing. And it can be really hard to try to compare yourself and to say, oh, that person's doing this, so I should be doing this. And it's really hard to stick to your own path, I think. So I kind of have a warning, which is you should know your pathway going into summer of year 4. You should know ultimately what you're looking to do. So the schools that you're aiming for, the plan that you're following when you hope to start practice papers or when you hope to start topic tests, and not necessarily looking at others. And obviously that is, sometimes you can use those for inspiration. Other people you can definitely ask questions for, but not changing what you do based on one person or based on a specific advice. I think that's probably something that that we see more and more with social media, is that ability to try and keep up with what everybody else is doing, and everyone else is doing this thing, so I should be doing it.
And parents as well. Look at Gemma's slide, how to avoid burnout. You need to avoid your own burnout as well, because as a parent, especially if you're doing this on your own or you're doing it with tuition, you may be only able to afford 1 hour's tuition a week. That's all we could afford. We were not rich. We are not rich. Don't burn yourself out as well, because you've got, and especially if you've got more than one child going through this, you need to be robust yourself, and it can get very. If this is your first child, you're in year 4, it will become more intense. If you've already done this, then you're probably maybe a bit less intense with your second child. I was, because I knew Josie and I had successfully gone through this together. So I kind of knew the benchmark. But when you don't know, you could almost be a bit full on with that first child, and it possibly not necessary. You've got to gauge it yourself, but don't burn out yourself either.
Yeah. Ultimately, like, no athlete trains at 100% capacity all of the time. So you can't put your child through doing that. And one of the things that I'm really keen on in terms of my team and in terms of the way that I work is that we should encourage children, and that it's kind of improvement, and confidence is a really big thing. And confidence is something that I would always say makes a difference to marks. So by showing progress and showing that your child is doing better each time and that they are progressing. And I deal specifically myself, I deal with super selective schools, so those really highly competitive schools, and I still believe that confidence is really important. So
Jemma, sorry to interrupt. I've got a couple of questions that I think you might be able to answer live.
Yeah, okay, go on.
The first one, Rishika, I'm going to come to you in a sec, but the first one is from a lady called Pavlina. And I think she's saying her child is in the situation, describe, I don't think they're in catchment for particular grammar schools. Now, and she's saying, could you recommend any school? Now, off the top of my head, I know Henrietta, do you know any schools that have got no catchment apart from Colchester, where Agnes's kids are?
Barnet has no catchment.
So
that's why it's selective.
Does HB have a priority catchment?
Henrietta, I think they do. I think they have a priority. So, I can come back to that one after and lead down a kind of list of non-catchmented.
So, Pavlina, there are schools that don't have catchment criteria, and I think Henrietta Barnet might be one. And I know that the girls, there's two Colchester grammars, but the one that Agnes's girls
version,
one with the long title, they don't have a catchment. But you've got to be practical in terms of, if your daughter passed, is she gonna be able to get there because you live 2 hours away? So that's what you've got to think about with these. So if you've got no grammar schools on your doorstep that you can't get to, I mean, you're saying you're at SE17. I don't know how far away that is from HB, from Henrietta Barnet. But, if you may have to consider moving, and that could mean renting somewhere, but as long as you live there within the criteria. But we can answer that a bit later.
It's definitely something to think about in year 4, because we know that catchment matters, and you have to live there for a certain amount of time with certain schools. So it is something you need to be thinking about now, because you need to be able to prove that you've been living there for a certain amount of time. So it's not something you can do just before taking an exam.
No. So now is the time, and to start. If you're in any of the other Facebook groups, just put notes out there asking for schools that are out of catchment. When you get suggested them, then go to that school's website and double check it, or double check with the LEA. Also, Rishika, hi Rishika, she her school is QE, which is a boys' school, and she's asking what she should do in the summer of year 4. And I would say English and reading for that school.
So QE Boys is a really highly competitive school. It's a highly competitive school because it has no catchment. And I will actually I've got a slide on what to do in year 4 for summer. But for these highly competitive schools, you are looking in terms of what I would be looking at is making sure that you are accelerating your child through the syllabus, through the checklist of topics, because I can see now, even now, I see year 5 parents who come to me and they say, my child isn't up to scratch in math, often in math because it goes beyond the year 6 level. And they're often expecting the school to be able to do it. And it's not something that is covered by the school. So you need to accelerate your child.
Jemma, we've got Saba on the call. Hi, Saba. For those of you who don't know, Saba runs an amazing group called the 11 Plus Journey. Both Jemma and I are very active. Saba has 2 boys at QE, Rishika, so she can tell you. She can tell you what you need. And QE, I believe, like Jemma just said, doesn't have catchment, but that's boys. But Saba is saying Henrietta Barnet does have some catchment rules, but check on their website. I'm not sure what they are. So I know the only one that has no catchment for sure is the school that Agnes's kids are in. So yeah, great.
Also,
Thanks.
I suppose year 4, something to think about in terms of, and it actually relates to burnout. It relates to parental burnout. There are some amazing groups out there on social media. At this time, I limit my use of them because there's a lot of information, and it can be really hard to kind of tear yourself away, because there's often lots of advice on there. There's lots of tutors like myself who go on there and talk about things. We do lives, but there's only so much information that a parent can deal with, and only so much of that kind of stimulation. So as a parental burnout, just make sure that you aren't glued to the screen, because I know that around this time, this is something that I feel, because there's a lot of everything. There's some negativity out there. There's a lot of overload. I find it quite hard sometimes to be on a lot of groups and do a lot of stuff. And I know that some parents feel the same. They feel like they have to get as much information as they can out of everything, but at the same time, it's sometimes quite overwhelming.
We've got a question from, I think it's Kotha. Apologies if I've mangled that. Okay. She's saying, how can we make learning fun in year 4? Gamification,
100%.
Without a shadow of a doubt. So reading, and let them read what they want to read. I'm going to steal a phrase from another friend of mine, Lucy, who's a tutor. And when she talks about reading, she talks about one for the head and one for the heart. So let your child choose a book from the heart, be that David Walliams, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, anything they want, let them read it. And then maybe get them to read one from the head. That might be one of my books. It might be a classic book. There's a lady called Dolly Jane who does great explanations of classics. You'll see a post in the group. Or even do 2 for the heart and 1 for the head, and with, have them reading, but then gamification with vocab. So there's loads of really good vocabulary games out there now. You've got things like Bananagrams, Scrabble. So it's funny when I think back now, my love of sort of words. I always love reading, and my favorite game as a kid was Scrabble.
And a lot of it.
And Scrabble is such a good way. And, if you can get that competitive going amongst siblings, you can get a junior Scrabble, which is great. There's Bananagrams, there's Whiz Bang is a really good.
One of the ones we did was we watched Countdown
quite
a bit. So I did quite a lot of the count and the math countdowns. I love those.
Can you believe Jude is playing Wordle? I can't, although I usually get the words for him. But anything that gamifies year 4, I think really helps. And on the last slide as well, we kind of tried to gamify non-verbal reasoning. And I think that was partly because I hate it. So those cubes are great, that magnetic cube, anything that you can do that can help a kid, even a Rubik's Cube is going to help kids with spatial reasoning. So year 4, gamification, like I say, times tables, mine learnt them through singing. And then we made it less gamified as they went through to year 5. But anyway, sorry, go on, Jem.
No. I'm going to add some other ways to make it fun. If you go on a walk as a family, I would pick up an object, and then when you get back home, you each have to tell a story about that object. So I can't remember what the show used to be. There used to be a comedy show where you had to introduce a person and say who they were, your relation. So like, this is Simon, and I used to know him because he was my aunt's cousin. And you do the same thing with an object. This is a fir cone, but it's not a fir cone. This is a house for a fairy. And you can do lots of kind of creative games around that. So that's one thing that I really like to do with my students is I will go out in the garden with them, and we'll pick stuff up, and then we'll write a story about it, or we'll tell a story. I've got them behind me, but there are these really great things called Cuisinart rods. in terms of, as Sheena's mentioning, physical things. They're different sticks, they're different lengths. So you get one that's a whole one, and then you get one that's like a half, and then you get one that's a quarter, and they can be really great ways to understand fractions. But you can also make art out of them. So you can use them to create little pictures and things like that, which again is a different way of using it. You can get story cubes. So Rory's story cubes are really fun. They're like dice, but they've got pictures on them. So you roll them and you roll them and they come up with different pictures. I think I've got an animals one at the back. And then you either pick one and you can describe it, or you can tell a story with all of them. Simple things like using whiteboards to do short exercises makes everything more fun, because who doesn't like using a whiteboard and a colored pen? It's something I love to do even now. I've got whiteboard sticky tape all across my room so that I can write in whiteboard because it makes it fun. There's other things like online games. If your child is into online gaming, there's some great vocab ones out there. There's Free Rice. There's a times table app like Times Table Rockstars. There's Times Table Hit the Button. There's loads of like fun things to do, but that can be mixed in with workbooks, and you can put them together. Writing letters to friends over holidays, writing postcards, all of that kind of stuff is useful for getting to know kind of different vocabulary and using grammar and using spelling, but doing it in a different way. So that's always something fun.
We've got a couple of things here. Mega, this will be replayed. It'll be in the group afterwards. You'll be able to access it for as long as you want. And we've got a question here from Noreen. So, and I can answer this, and Jemma then can put her take on it. So this is from a parent. She'll give you the tutor take. So, kids going through CGP and other similar books, what level should they have completed at the end of summer? Thanks. Okay, so we're in year 4. Okay, now I will be honest. I liked mine to be a little bit further ahead than the CGP age gave. And there's a reason for this, a really valid reason, Noreen. The books, so Bond are a little bit difficult to begin with. First Past the Post are really difficult. I would say use them in year 5, unless they've now got specific books for the younger years. Because you're asking about CGP, the earlier books of CGP, so the 7 to 8, the 8 to 9 and 9 to 10, are fairly easy. But there's a huge jump, or there certainly was when my kids did it, between the standard of or level of difficulty from ages 9 to 10 to 10 to 11. And I was shocked. So your child could be, and you as a parent, could be lulled into a false sense of security if you are working right on the age that you're supposed to be for CGP. So I would, and I don't advocate this with everything. I don't advocate, doing GCSE stuff, not unless you're going to QE at the end of year 5. Forget I said that. I don't advocate pushing too far ahead, but with CGP, just be a little bit ahead and be aware that that jump from age 9 to 10 to 10 to 11 was huge, especially in the vocab. That's where the shocker was for me. I mean, it might not be, the gap might be a bit shorter now, but it was a huge gap. What are your thoughts, Jemma, on that?
So I've written 2 kind of additional things down, which is you don't need to do every question in the book. Often parents feel like they have to do 100% of the book and then move up to the next stage. And actually it can be useful to, it takes a long time for a start, but it can be useful if you pick a couple of the questions. Don't just pick the start, don't just pick the end, because often CGP group theirs. So they'll do like a simple numeracy and then they'll get more towards word problems. So don't just pick one section, but pick some throughout, because if your child doesn't score that well, it gives you stuff to go back to. And it means that you can work through a workbook and then say, okay, they didn't score that well or they didn't answer all the questions correctly in this section, so we're going to go back and we're going to go over that. And even for year 5 parents, that's something that I say to them: go back to the workbooks that you did and ideally write them in pencil so you can rub out the answers, and then you can give it to your child again, and by this point they would have forgotten the answer, so they might,
Jemma, if I can just jump in there.
Go for it.
I mean, I write workbooks, but I advocate that you don't write in them, not unless your child really wants to and you don't mind buying more, then do. I advocate not writing in them for 2 reasons. Give them away after, or flog them if they're in good condition. Why wouldn't you do that? But also what we did was we had A4 paper, and the kids would write their answers, even if it was multiple choice. They'd write their answers, A, B, C, D, on the A4 paper. And then what I would do at the bottom of the page was I'd put a score and a date. And we went back and redid everything, like Jemma was saying, that they got wrong, because they didn't remember, especially if you left enough time. And we certainly did that with the CGP test, the free test that come at the back of the book. But yeah, we didn't write in anything. And I'd just have a date, a score, and also I'd look at where they'd scored badly and go back and do that more than once. Because I'm not sure whether some parents just do the workbooks once and then move on. Yeah, if your kid gets really high scores on all of them, then move on. But if not, go back and make sure they're getting high scores on those before you move on to the next age. Because somebody's saying, so we've got people asking, and Jemma, you might be able to help this. So Shukriya is asking, what about AE books? Now, my only experience of AE books were back in the day. So I've not seen their most recent ones, but we found them to be quite challenging. So they were of a high standard. Back in the day, I felt that their audience was too broad. They were trying to aim at too broad an audience. I think they've narrowed that down. They do
specific 11 plus, and they provide a lot of material for their parents. I don't know the books personally, because they are for AE specific.
Difficult. Back in the day, they were difficult. So I would say ask other parents that are using AE books about that question. Somebody's saying, how about bond books? Should they be a little ahead too? My experience with bond was maybe a tiny bit, but not as much as CGP. Now, somebody's asking about Atom learning. Jemma, I know very little about Atom, except from the questions I've seen, they're tough. So, Jemma?
Yeah, so Atom doesn't go by age. So, because Atom is online and is iterative. So, from what I remember when I put my students on it, it's useful to do as a practice, and I do it alongside. I think that goes with my kind of other point about a lot of these book questions. I advocate for variety. I would never just stick with one publisher. And the reason for that is that, as Sheena said, the exam can change exam board. And with that brings an exam style change. So being able to do things from different books, and this is probably also why it's useful to not write your answers on the books, because you'll end up with a stack of them, and you can get them from the library as well. People forget, but you can get workbooks from the library.
Very good point, Jemma.
And you can then use them and then take them back, as long as you've got a record of where they are. And sometimes I say to parents, take a picture of the questions they don't get right. If you're doing it from the library, you can build up your own library of the questions that your child got wrong. So yeah, for all of these books that people are kind of asking about, it's great that people are asking about them, and please do continue asking questions. But variety is what I would say.
So sorry to interrupt, Jemma. Jemma, what was the name of the sticks again? Rahul is asking.
Cuisinart rods. I have some just behind me, but they're not with me.
We'll put it in the chat, Rahul, after. Now, Prerna, hi. Prerna's asking about Exambury. Prerna, I know nothing about Exambury. I've met the owners. They were very nice. A friend of mine who's a highly regarded tutor advocates them very highly. So I can't comment personally, but I've not heard anything bad. about Exambury. And if I had, I wouldn't say it in this forum actually anyway, but I'd probably speak privately. Somebody else is asking about Schofield and Sims for 11 practice. We only use them for maths. What, Gemma? Schofield and Sims?
I like Schofield and Sims.
You do? Okay,
yeah,
so Gemma likes them.
I like them because they do the one-page multiple mental math tests, and I like those because they are a really easy way for me to put something in front of a student and immediately see where we need to work.
Gemma, can I ask you a question though? Do you have to buy the answers separately?
As a teacher, I don't buy any answers.
Okay. So, look, forgive me, guys. I can't remember properly, but do Schofield and Sims come with answers? Because if they don't, I don't really like books that don't come with answers. But you know, that would be my only bone. I think I remember.
That I notice, unfortunately, because I usually do it alongside my student. So, and that's something actually that is always just to kind of add, can always be quite fun, and sometimes parents hate it, but you can always do questions alongside your child and they can always beat you. So that's something I do with my students. Often with Schofield and Sims, we will sit down with the same mental math practice and we will both try and get 100% in as little time as we can. And then we dock time points dependent on how much we get wrong. So it properly is a race. But that's to, again, gamify it.
Gemma, so thanks Anna and Janet. They're both saying that you have to buy answers for Schofield and Sims. That will be why I never use them. So Josie was given Schofield and Sims from a tutor early on, and I think probably I saw them and just thought, nah, I'm not buying books where I have to buy separate answers. That was just me. Obviously, it's a very personal choice. And lovely Saba is saying, you do not need to do GCSE level maths for QE. And I was saying that very tongue-in-cheek, Saba. You do not. It's just, Saba's got 2 boys at QE. And it's just a very high standard. And, you know, you're going to need just really high skills to get in there. And also Saba is saying atom learning is adaptive, as Gemma said. So it's not age-based. So it's I guess what that's adaptive means, it's AI, so it learns as your child.
So you don't get atom age 10. You just get atom. So you do atom. And I think it's great for independent ISEB practice. It's really good for ISEB.
It's atom from what I've seen. A lot of people that are going for private schools and, you know, maybe top tier private schools use atom. So, Karishma, thank you. Karishma is saying, if I am not mistaken, you can download the Schofield and Sims answers for free. And she's put a link there. Thank you so much. My ignorance, I didn't know that at the time. Now, Ash is asking, do children get tested on creative writing? Ash, that would depend on the school, your target schools. And this is something that Gemma has mentioned. If you're asking questions in any of the groups or on Facebook, always mention your target school, because the answers would vary very differently, because not all 11 plus exams are made equally. Okay, I think we can go on to the next slide. Can we, Jen?
All right, I'm actually gonna go back because we've gone a little bit ahead. So we've covered burnout and we're on to reading.
Oh, okay, right. Right. Here, a little plug, okay, and I'm going to make it brief. So my son didn't read. He still doesn't read fiction, and he had to have great vocab, so we wrote a book together. Those books are the Cadwallader Quest. They're behind there. They've got workbooks, but they're aimed at year 5. They are really hard, and I got a lot of parents asking me for books for younger readers, and I also felt really sorry because some parents were contacting me and saying, my child's in year 3 and they're reading your book, and I think, that's really hard. Some kids read it in year 3 and loved it. But anyway, long story short, I wrote a new series. It's called the Cadwallader Chronicles, and they're prequels. So think Star Wars. I don't want to compare myself to George Lucas, but the Cadwallader Quests have done well. So I thought I would write prequels, so books that you can read before the Cadwallader Quests and then read the Cadwallader Quests after. So I don't know if they'll come out the right way. So there's 2 books out now. This is the first one, Trap, This is the second one, Cipher. There will be 4 books this year. The third one will be in July, and that's called Siege. The fourth one, I don't know the title yet. I'm still writing it. They are aimed squarely at year 4. However, with these, I would feel much happier if there was a confident year child 3 reading them. If your child is in year 5 and a great reader, and you've not read any of them, still start with these, because these will give you a nice lead in to the Cadwallader the Quests, which are really hard. And ironically, the first book of the Cadwallader the Quest, Tangled Time, is the hardest. It's the first one I wrote. I wrote it for Jude, didn't know if I'd ever write any more, stuffed it full of vocab. So it's hard. Also, now I run free weekly comprehension sessions. And I do this because if a parent's going to buy one of my books anyway, okay, if they bought it anyway, I wanted the opportunity to read the books with their kids and talk about them. So it's not about who reads well or who's the nicest reader. It's about understanding what we've read. You've got to be in my Telegram group. And the reason for that is safeguarding, because I post a different link every week. Because we sometimes get undesirable people pretending to be children on there, believe it or not. Yeah. And so cameras on. Everybody has to have their camera on so I can see that I'm talking to a child. They are not recorded for safeguarding reasons. And every week we send a new link. And they're great fun. I'm getting good feedback. We get between 30 and 60 kids every week. Your child doesn't have to join in. They can sit there and just listen. If they want to read, they can. They're great fun, and they're just a really nice way of discussing the work. But forgetting my books, if you look at the slides, like we said, read anything, because reading anything is better than reading nothing. And even subtitles on TV shows. I mean, my husband won't watch anything that's not in English because he won't read subtitles. I love subtitles. I actually really...
They're on all the time in our house.
I don't know why. I love them. So I can actually have sound off and read English subtitles, but maybe I'm a bit bonkers. And like Jemma has put at the very bottom, non-fiction, fiction, poems, plays, you know, the children's newspapers, leaflets, anything. In fact, leaflets are great to read because, you know, a child may have to write a creative writing piece where they have to inform. They might have to write a newspaper headline. And if they know those different formats and their audience, then that's great. But whatever you read, if your child really does not want to read X, but wants to read Y, then Y is better than nothing. Yeah. So anyway, that's my plug over, I promise.
I've got two things to add on the slides. The first is I've seen an increase in the amount of children doing things like public speaking, and it's really, really helped them with things like creative writing and inference, especially in comprehension. So performance is something that I would maybe suggest if your child is interested. Maybe they go to a stage coach, maybe they're part of a theatre group. When you're discussing inference, ask them how they would act that character, because it often helps them to understand those trickier marks. And when I say inference, it means things like, how is that character feeling? And how can you tell what that character is feeling, or what's going to happen next? And why might you think that's going to happen next? Or is the place setting scary, or is it exciting, or is it, you know, what's the feeling of the piece? And that actually, I found with my students who do drama, they find it a lot easier to do that. So that's one thing. And the second is just that I know that a lot of you who will be listening to this will have Sheena's books, but just Sheena didn't mention that the inside of the books has a dictionary at the bottom. They are written so that you can have a look at what the words mean, which my students really love. And sometimes they like reading that, and then they like reading the story, which is a little bit of an unusual way to do it. But some of my students who really like, it's kind of gamification. They like gaining more words. That's sometimes something that it's one of the, I haven't seen another book that's written like that, and it is written so that your child can understand the words. So
Jemma, we've got a few little questions here. If I can dive in, hang on. So hang on. All right. So Rahul says, my daughter is aspiring for Kendrick and will be taking the test in September 2023, so next year.
Yep.
Would you suggest we prepare for creative writing, please? Rahul, tricky one. I know why you're asking that question, because you're thinking it might go the same way as Reading School. There's no harm in preparing for, okay, so my daughter's at Kendrick, my son's at Reading, CEM. We did no creative writing. That came and pinched us on the backside when they started to do English in year 7, because we hadn't really practiced it at all. We didn't really care about SATs because they passed 11 plus. My advice is there's no harm in it. But if Kendrick stays as CEM come next spring, I would focus more on the vocabulary and on the verbal skills, just because I know the competition there. And what will get you, obviously because my daughter's there, what will get you into Kendrick if the exam stays the same is your vocabulary and your speed at which you can answer those questions. So obviously you're going to have great maths and non-verbal reasoning, but 50% of the marks is vocab. So I would say get on the school's mailing list or keep a close eye on their website. I've not heard any rumours that they're going to change, but we wouldn't hear rumours. They will just let us know. So come next April, if it's not changed, then I would say focus more on the vocab and the verbal skills, and then maybe in the summer after the 11 plus, do some creative writing work to get her up to speed for when she's doing English.
And I suppose I'd add, if it is staying as it is and you're thinking, oh, it would be a waste to do it now, think of it as it is a form of revision for the English as well, because you are introducing new words and you are making sure that the grammar is there and you are making sure that the spelling is there. So you really are working on those skills, but in a different way. So obviously, the closer it gets to the exam, if it stays the way that it is, creative writing is not the best exam practice for those exams. However, in year 4, and as we approach summer of year 4, is a great thing to start creative writing, because it can help you to practice a lot of the vocabulary skills and a lot of the proofreading skills, and actually understanding, again, things like inference in comprehension and that kind of stuff through your own writing.
Actually,
so
Jemma,
it can
sorry,
help.
I just want to
go for it.
You just made me realise what I wanted to mention before. So having now sort of done these free comprehension stroke vocabulary sessions with the kids, and how it works is the kids have a copy of Trap, whether it be on Kindle or paperback. We read together, the kids read, and then we go back and I do verbal comprehension with them. So we don't do any writing because we don't have the time. But because we're doing this verbal, and because I wrote the books and I know explicitly what I mean and where everything is, we do mostly inference questions. And the reason why we do mostly inference questions is because I've now seen that that's where the kids, and my kids were the same, it's where the kids really struggle.
It's the reason I mentioned it. It's the thing that everyone struggles with in comprehension.
But they really struggle, and they, bless them, they really think they know what it means, because that's their little brain and how it interprets it, which is great if they're reading for pleasure, because it doesn't matter. You know, if they're reading Lord of the Rings and they're imagining it on planet Zark with horses and unicorns, it doesn't matter. But when they're having to retrieve it for a test, it really does. So I would say when you're doing comprehension at home with your kids, inference is the number one thing that I would really, really keep working on. And remember, I tell them it's their detective skills. Yep. So they have to work out what the author is saying reading between the lines. So I say to them, guys, what do I really mean there? Because I didn't say what I meant. What am I pretending to say? What I'm hinting to say? Inference is what is not, what the author means, but is not explicitly written on the page. And if you can really, even when you're watching telly with them, or something happens in your house, if you can help them understand hints, detective work, inference, it'll make all the difference. And that's now what I work.
Good.
I work for really now my hour-long sessions, because I do an hour on a Saturday and an hour on a Sunday with them. It's all about inference, and we might only get 2 pages covered, but because I really don't let it go. If they don't understand it, I keep going and going until every child puts their hand down. But yeah, inference. Anyway, sorry, Gemma, I digress.
No, and when we run our summer courses, inference is the biggest thing that's asked for, because it's the bit where students don't understand how to necessarily find the answer,
because they're not explicitly there, are they? Even though a child, you can say to a child, every answer is in a comprehension, but they're all thinking it's retrieval. So if it's not written there, then this must be the answer. And bless them, you know. But I actually love it when the light bulb goes on and they go, oh yeah, you know, I see what you mean. Gemma, I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So Umi, I hope that's Umi. She's, I can't see if you're a he or a she. Do we need to buy the books in order to join the classes? Right. The answers to that question is absolutely not. Your child can just join and listen, but they might not get as much out of it. However, there is a little workaround that you can do, okay? And don't tell Amazon I said this, but all of my books are enrolled into Kindle Unlimited, okay, which is called KU. Now, if you go to Amazon, click onto the books, click on the Kindle version, you can sign up for, it's either 1 month or 3 months free trial of Kindle Unlimited, okay? Which means you get access to all my novels and hundreds of other great children's books. And then after your month or after your 3 months, I've signed up for a 3 months trial in the past, so but I don't know if that's a special offer. I mean, I subscribe to KU anyway, but after your 3 months, if you don't want it, cancel it. But remember to cancel it, because if you don't, they'll take your money.
Ooh.
If it's,
I have another. You can also do the same on Audible. If you have a Prime, and Audible, because it does audiobooks, is another great way of reading with your child,
no,
especially particularly ones.
Yeah, I mean, I consume most of my books via Audible now, but so Umi, you can get the books free for a month or 3 months if you, and then that way you can see what you think, you know, and you can join the classes, and then if you like them, invest in the paperback. But also, you know, unfortunately, my books are not available in the library because they're published by Amazon. But you can get them free if you sign up to Kindle Unlimited. Just seeing if there's any more. So Saba says, Gemma also helped her very much with great advice on uni choices. She does it for schools as well, so she would definitely recommend booking a call with her to discuss schools and admission rules. So, oh, sorry about that. The dog's barking again. Just seeing if there's any more questions. So our Charmer says, can we share the online vocab games apps? Yeah, we'll try and remember to do that. Yeah. Prona, you're saying, can you share the link, Sheena? I'm not sure which link.
Oh, I think it might be to join in with the book classes.
Oh, yeah, of course I can. Yeah, we'll do. And oh gosh, I've got to say this. Mega, thank you so much. Mega is saying Trap and Cipher are amazing according to my year 4 child. I had to get that in. So,
hence year 4. Year 4 is useful. And it is, you know, really kind of, and reading with your child can also become a big thing. And I know people who've done this the whole way through, ever since they were really, really young. And in terms of like inference, if you get to the end of the chapter, asking them why they did it, or even just stopping halfway through, having a discussion, do it. And you can do it with Trap, and you can do it with Cipher, and you can have that discussion. If you're not available to join Sheena's classes, So I know some people, for example, want to keep the weekends free. Then it is something that you can read with your child, and you can ask them those types of questions, and it allows them to be able to discuss it and do try. And that verbal comprehension is something that, I mean, I still do it with my GCSE students. I do it all the way through, because sometimes writing is the bit that is boring, and it's the bit that the child doesn't want to do, but you can still get some really great learning out of them by discussing it. And again, when you're doing that and you're traveling in summer, you don't have to bring big workbooks with you. You can do stuff that is small, and you can do stuff that might be on a computer or might be a little bit different. So go on, Sheena. I've interrupted you there.
No, not at all, Gemma. I was just saying, verbal comprehension as well is great if you've got multiple choice, because your child's not having to practice. Okay, writing standard answers, it's like the creative writing point. It's great practice, but if you're desperately trying to get into a particular grammar school and it's on multiple choice, then spoken comprehension is great, because they've only got, they've got to choose one of 4 answers, and you can go over everything with them and say, why isn't it this one? Why do you think that wasn't right? Why might it be this one? Why? And that's how they'll really get to learn the inference. And I'll be honest, I didn't do enough inference stuff with my kids when they were doing the 11 plus, because I hadn't written books then. It was only afterwards that I've really started to think about this and how key it is. And you can really see the kids that understand inference vis-a-vis the kids that are still struggling with it. And once it clicks, they fly.
And in creative writing as well.
Yeah.
Because in creative writing, if you understand inference, you can be a more subtle writer. Yeah. You can start to add in things. We talk a lot in creative writing about show, not tell. And that links in with inference. So they go hand in hand.
That is inference genres,
yeah. So if you can master inference in the comprehension, then being able to do it in the creative writing is so much easier, because you can tell what your character is trying to do the whole way through the story, and you can match what you're saying to their emotions at that time, and you don't end up with this weird conflict. And I know sometimes people write and there's this kind of odd conflict that seems, because they've thought about the way that their character is feeling, and then the next paragraph they've kind of forgotten, and the inference isn't necessarily what they're thinking about the whole way through, and it can come across as a little bit jarring in creative writing.
So guys, if just very quickly touching on the creative writing part, if your child is writing a piece for creative writing and they're just telling the whole time, teach them inference. Tell them to hint at what they're saying via figurative language, by drawing pictures with words, rather than just telling us. So I went to the shops at 9:10 p.m. and I bought a cake. Okay, you can just change that and show us with description rather than telling, and that is very similar to inference, like Gemma says. Okay, it's what is not explicitly written on the page, but we can guess it from the way the author's written it.
So instead of like, I was hungry, you could say my tummy grumbled, or to be able to hint at it, I salivated as I looked at the cake on the shelf.
Absolutely perfect. Yeah. Or my friend looked at my stomach and thought the dog was growling. Something. I mean, that's really clunky, but yeah, that kind of thing. So,
on to. Oh, we've been through this one. So, yeah. Ideas of death by workbook we have already discussed, but there are lots of ways to make learning a little bit more fun. Vocab focus, and again we've gone through some of this, but not necessarily all of it.
We've covered a lot of that. But
obviously vocab is important, and there are ways that you can make it more fun. So being able to compete with family and friends, or by playing games around synonyms and antonyms, and I know that both Sheena and I have used games in terms of vocab.
Yeah. I mean, very, very quickly, because I realised we've been on an hour now, and we thought we'd be half an hour. guys, the best way to learn your vocab is start early, use it at home, So as a parent, make a note, 5 words, okay, and bring it into your conversation over and over and over. And I don't mean drum it into them. I mean, try and bring it into your sentences over and over and over, and upgrade your vocab. So even if when you upgrade your vocab, it sounds really pretentious. So instead of saying, I don't know, we're going to be late or don't be late, you can use the word tardy. And even though it's like, oh, my kids would have gone, Mum, it doesn't matter. They're hearing it and they're getting used to it. And then when they see it in a text, they'll go, oh, yeah, you know, my mum used that, blah, blah, blah. And that is the best way. And I've make up silly sentences, serious sentences, anything that can help them recognize the word and using it over and over.
We do daily challenges to use the word as many times as you can correctly in a sentence. So sometimes it does get a bit silly, but that's the point of it.
It doesn't matter. I remember trying to teach Jude what moral compass meant. That was quite interesting. Because all he saw was a compass, you know. Oh dear. Yeah, but anyway. So yeah.
Right. Summer break, and I know someone asked about this earlier. Again, from me, it comes a short plug. Ultimately, I run summer courses for year 4s and year 5s. And they are 1 week online summer courses. So they are kind of the time that we spend focusing on specific topics. We do a creative writing, an English, a math, a verbal and a non-verbal, so that you can kind of boost those subjects, those topic areas. And we've got students in for all 5. We've got students in for 1. And what I'll do is I'll pop a link down so that anybody who is interested in that can come and speak to me about whether it would be the right fit. Because for me, it's important that it's the right fit for your child. And that's something that kind of goes through all of our courses, making sure that it is the right kind of course for you. But those kind of courses aside, summer break should be in year 4. Remember, you've still got the summer break of year 5. So do not burn out over summer because you are doing everything that you possibly can. I know that as a tutor, I should really be saying you should be doing all the courses, but in terms of actually making sure that you can get your child through those exams and that you don't burn out and they don't burn out, do take some time to relax. It is important. Set a plan for your child. Can be flexible, but get their buy-in is something that I've written down, and it's something that I work sometimes with students on, but honestly, it's something that parents really excel at. But how do you make, and Sheena, I'd love to hear from you, how did you get the buy-in from your children? Was it there at the start?
I simply didn't. I'll answer that question in a second. I've just got another couple of questions that have come in, Gemma.
Of course.
One that probably you're going to help me answer. So I think it'd be nice to answer these and then we can bring it to an end. So Mega, she says, some of the grammar schools advise that children should not be tutored for the 11 plus. What are your views on this? So Mega, I'll answer quickly and then Gemma can answer. From my experience, all grammar schools will state that they don't advocate tutoring. My answer to that is, if you can afford tuition, have it alongside what you do at home. No tutor is going to be a magic bullet, because they're not with your child enough. Your tutor can really help fill in your gaps and their gaps, so long as you've got the right tutor. If you can't afford a tutor, you can absolutely do it yourself. But I can guarantee you that most kids are tutored by a professional, and if they're not, they are tutored by their parents at home. There's very few kids that are going to just go into this exam and pass it with possibly a high enough mark to get a place. That's my personal opinion, and it's a personal one, but that's what I feel. Gemma?
Obviously, I am a tutor and I run a tuition agency, so there is a bit of bias. However, 2 weekends ago, I had my mother-in-law come round, and her partner's grandchild is taking 11 plus, and they've said that they are not doing tutoring because he is bright enough and he will pass. And unfortunately, I said to her, that's not going to happen because you need to be aware of the exam. And just sending your child into an exam that they have no idea about how the exam works, as in the technique. How do you fill out the boxes? How do you make sure that you're sticking to time? What is verbal reasoning? It's not taught in schools, neither is non-verbal reasoning. Half of the maths isn't taught in schools. You're going to be at a significant disadvantage, even if you have an incredibly bright child. So whether that tutoring stays at home, whether that tutoring is a tutor, whether it's an online tutor, in-person tutor, whatever it is that suits you, most children who go into that exam have had some form of prep.
And it's worth sorry, Gemma, just to reiterate, parents, in case you don't know this, the 11 plus will test your child on the whole Key Stage 2 syllabus, which means they have to be at the end of year 6 by the end of year 5. Now, if a child is not exposed to that work, how can they possibly go in and do it?
If you have a bright child and you don't want to prepare them at home and you don't want to tutor them, you're doing them a disservice by sending them into the exam, in my opinion, because you are setting them up and putting them through that stressful environment without giving them any of the tools to tell them how they can do it. So that is like me sending you into a job with no training.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't do that to anybody, because that is unsafe for someone's mental health. That's also unsafe for someone's confidence. And that's why, yes, tuition can be at home and can be with a tutor, but preparation is something that I believe should be done for 11 plus.
Okay, we've got another couple of questions and then we are going to say goodbye. You can then, we'll come back to you in the chat. So Viresh says, I have a year 4 child. He needs encouragement with reading. Should I let him read alone, or should he read aloud, or should I read aloud with him listening? I would say all of the above, but in small bite-sized pieces so it doesn't bore him. Okay, so whatever. I actually read with mine, and they read to me right up until year 5. Only in year 6 did I sort of say, yeah, off you go, because they'd done the 11 plus. I'd say all of the above. And if he really is anti-reading, let him read what he wants. Jude only read the Guinness Book of Records and Ripley's Believe It or Not. That was it. So, you know, I had to literally, that's why we wrote Tangled Time together, because he didn't read.
If your child doesn't like reading to you, read to the dog or the cat or a stuffed animal with you in the room. So sit there and read the paper and ask them to read to whatever it is they're going to read, because that way you're listening to them in the background.
That is a great idea, Gemma. And Gemma hasn't even got any kids yet. Okay, another quick question. And Gemma, you can answer this from your tutor head and I'll answer it from my personal experience. Ash is asking, when is the right time to start mock tests? Ash, I did mock tests with both of my kids. I would absolutely say, if you can afford them, do them. You do see freebies offered, and I know there is a company that does do mock tests for a very cheap price if your child is a pupil premium child or something like that. I would absolutely say do between 2 and 3. I know people do 7 and 8. Again, I feel that's probably a bit overkill. With Josie did 2, Jude did 3, and we started around Easter. What I would say is don't do them too late, because if you do and you find what I call plot holes, then you won't have much time to fill in those plot holes. So that's my mum opinion. Gemma?
Just to clarify, you were saying year 5 Easter, right?
Yes, year 5, not year 4.
Not year 4.
Not test in year 4.
Don't test in year 4, it's too early. So
don't even do full tests in year 4.
No.
Unless they're in the back of the CGP book, the freebies, which are very age specific. No. Anyway, so Gemma, what do you think?
Too early in year 4, plan them for year 5, because it is worth planning so you can keep an eye out, because they do sell out fairly quickly, especially the PTA ones that the schools run. think about why you're doing them. What is the aim? The aim isn't usually to get the best mark on it. It's to help your child to understand what it's like to sit in an exam hall with other people if you're doing an in-person mock. Or if you're doing an online mock or a send-off postal one, it's to identify their mistakes. So think about what that aim is and communicate it with your child, because otherwise you get mixed messages. So make sure they're very clear about why you're doing them, but definitely not in year 4.
And guys, take heart. My son did 3 locally with a company called Susan Dowtry. I never know how to pronounce it. Yeah. We were very happy, but he never scored over 80% in one of those mocks. Okay. And he got into Reading School without going on the waiting list. So take heart if they're not. And some of the kids that he was compared to, the peers, were getting like 95. And I'm thinking, so take heart, don't worry. They're there to help you and your child improve, not to lose confidence. And also, the thing that is great for mocks, Jude missed out an entire math section in one of his.
But you learn.
And he didn't do it in the final exam because he did it in the mock. And that's kind of what you're aiming for, really, to make sure that doesn't happen. But don't get too hung up looking at the. I mean, obviously, if your kid is getting sort of really low marks, then you're going to have to sort of do something in the last minute to try and pull it up, and that's when an intensive an intensive course with somebody like Jemma might help. But yeah, that's what mocks are for. And
we do have year 5 that include mocks for that reason.
That's year 5, guys, we're talking about.
We won't let year 4s on that particular boot camp for that reason, because they've got mock exams.
Right, this is the very last question. Elena, you're asking which books you should buy for CGP. Your daughter's in year 4. As we said earlier, just beware with CGP. There's a huge jump between age 9 and 10 and 10 to 11. So my personal advice would be a little bit ahead. Okay, so a little bit ahead of where she should be, and then you'll be ready to hit the age 10 to 11 running.
And get a variety of books, ideally.
And yeah, lots of different providers. We used, I think, 4 different providers. And there was no real online-y stuff back then, so. Have you got anything else to add, Jemma? 2 hour 30-minute session, that's taken to 1 hour and 17.
We said this before we came online. We said we're going to go over time.
People are being very nice, though. They're saying thank you.
Well, I'm glad that it's helped. I am glad that it's helped, and I am aware that lots of people do year 5 sessions around this, and we will come back, and we have planned to do a year 5 one.
Yeah.
So there will be a year 5 specific one.
What's the date for the year 5 session, Jemma?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that.
Look, there will be.
We will put it down in the chat.
There will be a year 5 session in the group with Jemma.
But this one specifically for year 4s, because I know that there are lots of you out there, and there's lots of you who are, wanting some information, and often there's a lot of year 5 chat around this time. So that's why we've done it.
And thank you, Jasmine. She says her son loves reading the Cadwallader Chronicles. I hope he's joining the Saturday sessions, Jasmine. And yeah, well, thank you for joining. It's been good fun. Me and Jemma always have a long natter.
We talk a lot.
We do.
All right.
Thank you, guys. Jemma, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thanks for having me on. It's always great to do lives, so I do love talking. All right then, guys. Thanks ever so much. I'm going to end the broadcast now.
And if we missed anything, I'll answer tomorrow now, though, because I'm a bit knackered.
Bye.